So Ben Freeth, thank you so much for talking to us here at the Aussie Wire. We are in the atrium at the launch, the very first conference of the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. Where are you from? What brings you here?
I'm from Zimbabwe, and we were farming in Zimbabwe.
Oh, wow.
And then, of course, like everyone else, had the farm.
I was going to say, you used the past tense. You said you were farming. That's not a good sign.
It's not a good sign. You know, we had thousands of farms which were overtaken by government-sponsored thugs.
Yeah.
And very violent and terrible things were happening, and are still happening actually today in Zimbabwe at the hands of our government. And so, you know, in a total insanity like that, this conference just seemed to me a beacon of sanity in an insane situation that we're facing.
I want to pick up on that. That's really interesting to me, because one of the criticisms that's being levelled at ARC as a concept, as well as obviously the conference specifically, is that it's not going to have any real world outcomes. It's just a talk fest from a bunch of elites. How could this possibly have any impact on the ground? And yet you're saying to me, the moment you saw it, you said, that's it. That might be the solution that you're looking for the issues you have on the ground.
Well, I think responsible citizenship starts with the individual. And
Sure.
I think what we've got here is a gathering of individuals that want to be responsible for the world that we live in today and the future of the world that we live in today for our children.
Yeah.
And certainly, from my point of view, we've tried to be responsible in the situation that we're in Zimbabwe by standing for justice, standing for truth, standing for the things that we truly believe in order to create a different outcome.
Yeah.
And I think what we've got here is a group of people who are committed to the same kind of thing. They're individually involved with little parts in different parts of the world. But this coming together is a coming together of minds. It's a coming together of similar philosophy. It's a coming together of really wanting to make the difference in our own spheres around the world. And I think, you know, never despise the day of small beginnings. This is a small beginning, but it's actually something that's going to grow into something very big, I believe.
Now, the theme here is a better story. What does a better story mean, and especially in the context of, I guess, such a bad story that's being told in Zimbabwe at the moment? I mean, it's among the most difficult places on earth. There's a few that would compete with it for that title. Not that anyone wants it, but it would be up there. What's a better story in that context for what you've seen?
Well, a better story for us is a story where we are able to live without fear.
Right.
You know, we live in total fear in Zimbabwe. We live in fear for our very lives from our government at times.
Yeah.
And I think the rest of the world has seen a little bit of fear and the use of fear in shutting things down during COVID and stuff like that. And so fear has kind of crept into the rest of the world, into the psyches of people. And we don't need people who are living in fear.
Sure.
And so we need people to break out of that fear and to be courageous in the world that we are living in.
Yeah.
To speak truth into the society around us. And so for Zimbabwe, what we hope for is a country where we have the rule of law, where people are protected from government, where people are able to develop by themselves, where people are empowered with title deeds.
Yeah.
And you know, one of our big things in Africa is that probably less than 5% of the population, significantly less than 5% of the population have title deeds to their homes or their farms.
Yeah.
And so they can be kicked off at a moment's notice. And as a result of that, Africa is poor, Africa is hungry. But this is never really talked about.
Yeah. Actually, it has been talked about. It so happens that I have Bjorn Lomborg's book right here in front of me. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Best things first. There's 12 things in here, and one of them is all about titles and ownership and actually giving people that confidence, because as you say, it's a serious problem. Westerners might go, well, how's that a problem? Well, it stops people from investing. They're not going to invest into improvements and efficiency, etc. Now, so we talked about what the better story might be. How did we end up in a situation, and how did Zimbabwe end up in a situation where we needed a better story? What went wrong with the old story?
Essentially what happened was the government that had been in place for 20 years at the time in the year 2000 suddenly had an opposition party formed. Before that, because it was Marxist communist.
Sure.
They didn't have an opposition party. And then the Berlin Wall came down and various freedoms started to develop.
Okay.
And suddenly we were moving towards multi-party democracy. And of course, that's a huge threat to a dictatorship. And so they decided that they had to unleash these thugs on the farms where the swing vote was, and ensure that people were brought into fear so that they could not vote in any way for the opposition, so that the opposition couldn't move around on the farms in any way, that they couldn't form support groups on any of the farms, and people were brought into abject fear. And it was very, very effective. They've managed to stay in power for another 23 years beyond that 20 years.
A lot of people in your situation have left Zimbabwe. Why have you stayed?
Yeah, I mean, our black population, I think 30% of the black population of Zimbabwe has left. Of the white population, 90% of us have left.
Yeah.
I believe that we have to make a difference, and I'm a Christian. I believe that we're called to be salt and light in a dark and rotten world at times. And we have to play our part in doing that. And so I'm there to try and make a little difference. We took our president to court. We've actually got a court case next week in the Constitutional Court of South Africa, where we took President Zuma in South Africa to court for his part in destroying the SADC tribunal in Windhoek, which was the court for 300 million people in Southern Africa when our own courts failed us.
Yeah.
They destroyed that court, Mugabe and President Zuma and a few others. So we are continuing the fight for justice. We're continuing the fight to try to create a better future for everyone in our country.
Well, Ben, I think that's the story of ARC, and it now makes perfect sense to me why you're here. I applaud your courage. Thank you for all that you're doing, and thank you for talking to us here at the Aussie Wire.